I wanted to talk to you today about Chuck Yeager's lifelong commitment to Rolex, perhaps also as an extra and belated celebration of July 4th. As you can see here, he is much later in life, the late Chuck Yeager, posing in his full flight gear with GMT Master 2 on his wrist, which is a watch that became basically one and the same with him as an icon in the later stages of his life. And it was a Rolex Oyster of an unknown or unidentified provenance that accompanied him on that historic achievement of the supersonic flight on October 14th, 1947, with the Bell X1. And this is the watch that is believed to be that particular Rolex Oyster on his wrist here. Over the years, he has worn many different Rolexes. He has been photographed with those Rolexes on his wrist. For example, here you can see the late Brigadier General Chuck Yeager with a 6538 on his wrist, a big crown Rolex Submariner without the crown guards. Perhaps the model that is behind the Tudor Black Bay 58 today as an inspiration, also known as a Bond watch, of course. And here you can see Chuck Yeager again with an earlier iteration, with the first iteration of the GMT Master, which is a 6542 without crown guards and with what looks like a bakelite bezel. And those bakelite bezels, precisely because they were loomed, because they were glowing with radium at the time, presented some legal liability for Rolex, and they were already changed out towards the end of that reference's lifetime with the aluminum bezel inserts that we came accustomed to until 2007, which will play a little part in our story today as well. So that's a 6542, the so-called Pan Am GMT Master, the travel watch that was introduced for Pan Am pilots to allow the tracking of more than one time zone at a time, two time zones at a time. And here you see it on the wrist of a different kind of pilot, the test pilot who broke the sound barrier for the first time in history, Chuck Yeager. And here you can see how Chuck Yeager's style was not limited to his flight gear and flight jackets, leather jackets. He could also turn up quite well in that traditional American style as well, that we would either know as trad or prep today. And there he is wearing again his GMT Master to what I believe is a 16710. Of course, Rolex capitalized on his glory, on his historic achievement over the years. And he appeared later in life, especially in a number of marketing campaigns for Rolex. Here you can see an ad for the Rolex GMT Master. And he is dispensing here some wisdom. If you want to grow old as a pilot, you've got to know when to push it and when to back off. And of course, today, GMT Master is branded by Rolex as the cosmopolitan watch, as the travel watch. But its provenance as a pilot's watch, of course, is no secret. And the fact that in addition to Pan Am, that it is associated with someone of Chuck Yeager's stature, of course, means a lot. History is not always written quietly. Sometimes it requires a sonic boom. They have one thing I appreciate about this particular series of Rolex advertisements is that it shows that they have taken particular care in preparing the copy. Because especially from a later period, after the 70s, you can sometimes see Rolex in the marketing department slacking off a little bit, resting on their laurels. But once every so often, there are these sorts of advertisements that really wax poetic and in a good way about certain historic achievements with which Rolex has been somehow associated. And this is a GMT Master 2, of course. Again, presumably what very frequently appeared on Chuck Yeager's wrist later in life. And here he is endorsing 16713, the two-tone or bimetal version of the 5-digit reference. I don't really think that is what he's wearing in this photo, but he sure as hell looks pretty cool next to that Bell X1, the plane with which he broke that sound barrier, the plane which he called after his wife, Glamorous Glennis. And you can see it in the background here. And I wanted to also share with you this limited edition Rolex GMT Master 2 that was actually released by the Japanese brand of Americana with the name the Real McCoys. They basically focus on workwear related classic American clothing and make these faithful reproductions of flight jackets, of aviator jackets, of leather jackets especially. And in year 1997, and you see their certificate for this watch is actually dated exactly on the Golden Jubilee of that achievement, they released a limited edition of 50 pieces of these Rolex GMT Masters, which they customized aftermarket by introducing, first of all, Chuck Yeager's name on the dial in red writing, which I think is a beautiful touch, and of course, asserting their own brand as well on the dial. Additionally, the watch is engraved on the case back to commemorate that fateful day on which Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier, October 14, 1947. And of course, there's that engraving of the Glamorous Glennis as well. And Rolex celebrated that achievement, of course, in their own way on the 50th anniversary. and on its 60th anniversary. But I thought it was quite interesting that the Real McCoys, in a way, upstaged Rolex on the 50th anniversary by taking this initiative to prepare their own limited edition of GMT Masters. And I think it's pretty cool. I know it's kind of apocryphal. Um, it's also kind of a heresy for many to see customized Rolexes, but I think when they're done right, to commemorate and to mark a particular time, particular event, a particular achievement in history, they do make sense. And what better instance than to mark the remarkable achievement of this man that still continues to resonate in history. Happy belated 4th. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it far and wide to help me reach 1,000 subscribers. And stay tuned for further content on our shared passion for wristwatches.